Namaste. What a beautiful message from Pujya Swamiji on ahimsa. Ahimsa paramo dharmaha, the main trust of our human life as ahimsa. May we join in prayer for this amazing opportunity to be here in this very sacred space. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. It's a pleasure to be here in Yogaville. What is ahimsa? We knew from Gandhi's Satyagraha that it is the path of truth. His purpose was to free India, and he did so skillfully with simple, incredible trust of his own heart. We've come into an incredible time, as we all know. This is just a time of massive transition, where the earth herself has divinized to the point where everything is changing. But it is changing for the better, because it's not just our roles that are changing, it's our consciousness that is becoming awakened across the board. Vast numbers of population are becoming conscious just by the nature of the time that we live in. And yet we must do the work for this. What is that work? Ahimsa is not the non-violence that's outside of ourselves. It's not even about our response to violence. It is an inner work that digs very, very deep, really excavates our own spirit, so to speak, in order to bring forth the fruit of what we need. So it is not an easy path, but it is, for humanity, the only path. In the course that we've been teaching this last weekend, this past few days, we talk about the Shakti energy of the feminine, the divine feminine, the primordial feminine, the absolute that we must bring back into a state of balance again. Of course, women have a lot to do with this. To reclaim that power is one of the greatest feats of ahimsa that we can possibly imagine now. It is the most imminent goal awaiting us as women. Men also have an incredible role here. They also have the Shakti in a very different way and purposed differently because of the way that we are configured in the gender. And we all know that eventually we transcend even these genders. But to go back to understanding that there has to be a balance in our universe, not just of male and female, Shiva and Shakti, but the divine feminine within itself, because she is the mother of the earth. She is the nurturing and nourishing and healing factor. Peace is a very feminine thing. In fact, without the mother, there is no peace. And so we can look at ahimsa from the point of view of cultivating our incredible primordial femininity again, and what does that really mean? So much of it has been shifted over millennia by various power structures for various reasons, simply from a response of fear of that power that the woman carries, that the mother carries. She's synonymous with Mother Earth. She is Mother Earth. She has the creativity in her womb. She has not only the ability to birth ideas and creativity and nourishment and nurturance for all her young and the men and the animals and forests, trees and skies, but the absolute power to endure the suffering that Mother Earth endures as well. We cannot arrive at a place of reclaiming whom we are without understanding our basic nature as configured by Mother Nature. Today we talked a lot about suffering being an organic part of the mother's journey, the woman's journey, Mother Earth's journey. And what do I mean? That women just suffer and that we are there to abide by pain? But the suffering takes on a different light. It takes on, compared to the massive power of our primordial Shakti as the feminine, suffering is just negotiated and mitigated in so many incredible ways when we reclaim that power. The amount of himsa, which is not a himsa, that has been put upon our Mother Earth is so vast, indescribable. And now it is time for us to reclaim it, but women have to resume the understanding of who they truly are. We are fighting all the time for equal rights, but we have the superior rights of passage, R-I-T-E-S. We shan't be so concerned about equal rights. Nothing in the world is exactly the same or equal. Everything has a purpose and everything has its own magnificence to it by rote of its mere nature. But what we are looking at is understanding the deeper values of the Shakti. What does Shakti have to do with the Himsa? As I said, peace is a feminine principle. It is the maternal bedrock on which all of our life depend. Every time we have rocketed our minds and intelligence to discover more of nature and destroy her as a result of it, for so much of it is destroyed through the investigative mind, through the pioneering mind. We cannot blame our karmas for having these thrusts, these forward thrusts. But what we can do is we have to always consider that it is damage to the very Shakti of our Mother Earth. The very Shakti of the woman gets damaged. So we reclaim that. We reclaim it because our first duty, humanitarian duty, is ahimsa, the protection of our mother. And the mother is totally connected to us. How did clinical medicine, how did poisoning or food source, how did genetically modifying one species' memory into another in a whole conglomerate of chaos, how did all of these so-called life ways became normal for us? Have we ever questioned how could we ever have condoned and participate in these processes that dehumanizes the very consciousness that we, the human species, carry? We're looking at all of this, and it comes down to one word: mother. Mother Earth, Bharata, Bhumi, whatever we call her. She's inside of the womb of every female species, and certainly in the consciousness of every woman. Clinical medicine, prescriptive ways of life took over because we simply lost connection to the greater elements of the lunar rhythms, wherein in the new moon we are absolutely shedding the linings of our womb in little tents and back to Mother Earth, because that is the Shaktified material from which life itself comes. It is indescribable. And at the full moon, receiving the full ojas, and 16 notches or nityas of Mother Moon, we have each boon that is given to the woman to ask for, just in that incredible understanding. The Vedic culture is interesting. Hinduism has nothing to do with idolatries. In fact, we have no idols. It is all the phenomenal network of memory that the rishis understood in terms of their archetypal value. And because we, the humans, need nama, rupa, name and form in order to connect, these forms of the goddesses and the gods and the devas, every form, every tree, every river is a form. It's a form that we worship, we venerate it. We're not venerating idols and the idols of Guru, we're venerating the divinity of it all. And we have manifold layers of how we can venerate that divinity. It's all so incredibly purposeful. The Hindu tradition is vast. It's not a religion. We know it's Sanatana Dharma, a way of life, the way of Dharma. And what we're doing here in Yogaville is so spectacular. I have been in love with this master, Satchidananda Ji, for many, many years. In fact, when I was escaping the Stoic Brahmin home, I was only 16, born in Guyana, then British Guyana, my first trip to America in 1969, I was privileged to see Swamiji at Woodstock. And I realized that you cannot run away from your roots. And that's as far as one could go to run away from your roots. The haze of smoke and rain and mud and naked people. It was very distantly different from the village culture that I grew up with, where we went to temples and, and prayers. So I was so fortunate to receive Swamiji's darshan even before I knew I had that darshana. And then later, when my birth father died, I met Swami Dayananda, who is my Param Guru, who just recently attained his Mahasamadhi and studied Vedanta and Sanskrit with him, and then Ayurveda on my own. My journey has been an interesting one. The perspective of being born outside of India has served this journey well, in that at a very young age of 18, I had ovarian cancer. And when I recovered from it, through the divine grace, the Divine Mother's grace, in fact, I understood that the journey was already written. It is to serve this purpose. It is to serve everyone, and women in particular. So we can say so many things about ahimsa. We all know that peace starts within us, and so we have to do the inner work in order to make that whole synthesis of life meaningful for us. It has to begin inside. We have to be the sakshat, or the witnesses, of our own thought process, of our own conditioning, of our own ancestral underpinnings, of our own prarabdha karma, or the karmas that have gone before. But I do agree with Pujay Swamiji that we shan't so much live in our past karmas. But certainly if part of the roof falls and it falls on a particular head, it is part of our karma. And we accept that. And then it really mitigates why, how, when, where, and all of these things. Life is very simple if we accept that whatever is given to us is part of the karma, but we can change that. I've been learning that over and over in my many transformations in this life, and many name changes as well, that basically we just have to stay present with who we are and do the inner work and be honest with ourselves when our minds are screaming something that is not ahimsa, whether it's through conditioning or thought or response to violence, whatever. If there is violence and we are responding in that way, then we are contributing to that. And if we find ourselves doing that, we understand, okay, we are by thought contributing. Thought is very powerful. The vibrational field of thought is extremely potent and powerful. That's how we can send thought to someone to help them to heal. That's how we can rocket that thought and direct it and focus it somewhere else. You know, when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina for many, many years, having grown up in New York City, I walked into a set of fields that were in the area we were moving the school, the Wysart school to. And the cows all had blinders on. And I wondered why they would have these blinders. And as it turns out, the farmer said that they had an eye disease and he just could not get rid of it. So I suggested to him that it might be very good if I could chant with the cows, but I didn't call it chanting because this is in the middle of the South. This is Bible country, Bible belt we call it, whatever that means. And another name for it is God's country. And you have, you know, these huge wheel vehicles and a lot of tattoos and on all these wonderful things. But the basic thing is the farmer would not have understood chanting. So I said, do you mind if I spend time with the cows in the morning? And he said, well, you seem to like cows. And I said, yes, I love cows. Many of our local rural people in that area didn't even take a train outside of their community. That's how innocent their vital tissue were. They were just part of that land, many doing beautiful farms until GMOs moved in and the contamination of our food source took over as a normal process in America. But they were beautiful people, and he allowed me to go and be with the cows. And in the morning I chanted Rudram. Om Namaste Astu Bhagavan Vishweshwaraya Mahadevaya Triambakaya Tripurantakaya Trikalagni Kalaya Kalagni Rudraya. And the entire Rudram I would chant with them in the early morning. Within 2 weeks, he said he couldn't believe that the eyes had already healed. And they were actually producing more milk. Now, that gave me an idea that I should actually continue to work with them, but not chanting the Rudram. Rudram is very specific. It's Shiva in the form of the destroyer of everything that is untoward and toxic, and etc., etc., etc. Shiva does a phenomenal dance with this, and we are imploring him to not be so fierce in the Rudram. So it is powerful, a chant. Nonetheless, in the mornings I would go and Om with the cows, and I would go, Om, and they would Om back. Om. And after a while I realized, like so much else in America, we have it all backwards. They were never mooing, they were always Oming. Later, as I settled in well into Pisgah Mountains, it's beautiful because it's where the Cherokee people used to live before they were marched on to Oklahoma, and many not arriving there. So the sassafras and ginseng and the forests were still filled with their herbs. There was still sentiency in the earth, but you could also hear it cry. So we did lots and lots of Vedic pujas there because to heal the land. What is ahimsa? Ahimsa, is it only about being kind to each other as human beings and to the animals? No. Ahimsa is remembering our connection back to Mother Earth, that she gives us everything, that she sustains us, that her love is truly unconditional, that her care and trust for us is supreme, immutable. That immutability, that connection, that seamless relationship that we've always had was fractured, and now it's time to get it back. Not just by becoming environmentalists, because you have to go through laws. While I was touring in New Zealand, I found a magnificent thing that the Maori people, the natural Aboriginal people of New Zealand, were able to accomplish for their sacred river, like the Ganges, their sacred river. They actually fought and got human rights for that river. And I thought, how brilliant to get around the environmental laws, which are also becoming corrupt, not the laws themselves, but the application of them, and basically to make the river human rights. It's more powerful. We've been trying to do this for the Ganges, for at least the last 50 years, 100 years, and it hasn't happened. We've been looking to give her back her goddess rights, but apparently we're not able to connect so seamlessly to the goddess, so she doesn't seem to be recovering her rights anytime soon. But that was really brilliant. And then as I started to look at what's been happening, Ecuador, too, passed certain laws about its forest, also with human rights. Now, these are new laws. These are phenomenal laws that are being passed. These are just the early precursors of what is happening and will be happening more and more with our participation. And that is, we are determined to protect our mother. And with that determination, we women first must reclaim our Shakti and our individual right back into our own power as women, because it had been sloughed off century after century after century. We have had it misused, feared, and devalued. And this is not a women's movement. This is not activism. We're not having any placards out there. This is inner work. This is difficult inner work because there's so much we have to override in order to get back to that space of sentiency within ourselves, that incredible noble space. Why am I concentrating on the women and not the men? Because it is the mothers who take care of the men and the children and the animals and the forest and the sky, the rivers, the water. Without mother, we have no care. Mother in all form is a phenomenal, phenomenal blessing. And we've got to, through our own practice, our own inner work is what I translate ahimsa to mean. Our own inner conscious work, we take back that which belongs to us, which is already there, which is natural to the whole organism of the female function. And it's not like we have to go anywhere and shop for it, it's right there. We just have to, as Swamiji would say, uncover the veils that had been covering it. And how can we do that now? Women had been trying from time to time, generation, your grandparents, your grandmothers, time after time to reclaim this enormous power. And this power is not the same as what we classify the word power to mean in the patriarchal societies that have built our world to the extent that it is now. When we are looking, and it's not a fight between matriarchs and patriarchs either, it is a rebalancing of the principle of the Shakti so that everyone is protected. But without it, we have no way of enforcing or living because there's no way we can enforce it. We have no way of living our own ahimsa. Ahimsa is not just our responsibility to thought and word and deed. All of it is conditioned. It's conditioned by our societies, our cultures, our myriad boundaries and barriers between people. And there's no fault in religion. Religion had one divinity. It was to venerate that God that we now know, and should all know, is within ourselves. And it isn't the fault of different scientists. And everyone has a karma. Everything is divine in its own light, so it's all going to happen. Dark, light, in between, whatever. However, the balancing force is reclaiming Shakti. I see that as the foremost work of ahimsa in our time. Because every time we make a sankalpa or an intent to protect thought and speech and word, then conditioning happens. Then you're hit by some toxic fumes, or you're hit by something else in the food source, or you're hit by this or that. And so you're constantly, if we're looking to have the mind create ahimsa, we're going to be constantly in this state of flux. And that is not a good place to be. So not only, but a wonderful and perhaps efficient way to do this is to reclaim the core, the maternal core. We have no choice. Because from the maternal core, everything else flows. It flows intuitively. It brings the graces in our life without us having to mentalize it and put it into a practice. How many things over the years have we put into practices and felt that the practice alone, as well intended as it was going to reap us this huge gift of sentiency, of our awareness and consciousness, and how many times have we failed? I remember I was with the Kushis in Brookline, Massachusetts, when I was very young. That would have been after Woodstock. And they had started the first, of course, they were teaching macrobiotics and Oriental medicine, and they had started the first health food store in Brookline, Massachusetts, called Erewhon. I believe it was the first health food store in America. What an amazing movement, because it brought with it the intelligence back of the land, of the farmers, of natural farming, of organic farming, of... It's a shame we have to call it organic. The whole earth is organic, except what we have done upon it. The other thing is a veneer. So now to have to call this organic is as if that's something new is an insane turnaround. It's like the om and the mooing. It's totally backwards. So now we've got health food stores. Do you know that our profit margin in America alone is over $50 billion a year in the health food market? But what has happened with this movement? I'm just giving us point in case of practice. Practice alone, we have to have something behind it. We have to have that core of ahimsa behind it, or else what happens is it becomes a humongous commerce. There's nothing wrong with making money or becoming commercial. But it has destroyed the very intent of health food. It has become a privileged pastime, and we haven't managed to serve one single poor person from this $50 billion of income that we get from that. So we have made it into what is called an elitist movement. How does this serve sentiency, can you tell me? And of course, we've started to monocrop to produce all the food we need to sell for $50 billion, and we started to harass the cows again so that we can get all this organic, so-called organic milk. When are we going to understand that there's nothing organic today? My garden is organic, you're spraying over there, you have genetically modified stuff, it's going to come over here. The whole universe partakes with each other. We have something that is supremely organic, and that is the immutability of our prayer, our sankalpa, our intent, our absolute ahimsa. And look at it all through those lenses, and I'm still trying. I've had a lot of things following me around, many, many amazing junctures of obstacles and things to deal with. But the way I look at it is, I always remember my grandmother saying that we're never given anything that we cannot carry. And I truly do believe that depending on the size of your journey, you're going to have the size of challenges to go with it. But if we can quickly bring back just the lens of ahimsa, let's say you're frustrated and irritated and angry and all of these emotions come from where? Mother Earth. She's screaming. She's absolutely suffering. And at the same time, she's abiding and enduring. Where do you think we get our emotions from? This is a vibratory field. We are picking up every human hurt, every hurt of the trees and the plant and the river. And we are all looking for happiness yoga and power yoga. But you know, that practice alone called by an adjective is not going to give us happiness or power. Because if an adjective can give it to us, if health food store could make us healthy, meaning an adjective, then we really didn't have to do much inner work at all. We could just sit back, earn a little bit of money, eat health foods, and you know, just put the lens of ahimsa on when we have a headache, and then it would be very, very simple. But the adjectives don't work, because just like we can have happiness yoga, we can have misery yoga too. Just like we can have power yoga, we can have impotent yoga as well. I'm sorry. Just like we can have intelligent memory yoga, we can have stupid yoga too. And the basic fact of the matter is it has nothing to do with the adjectives we plunk before beautiful practices just because we want to take it somewhere else. Why do we, as modern human being with intelligence, just morph everything in these directions? Because of one thing only: the way we're picking up the vibration of Mother Earth suffering. It's what throws us in this kilter of escapism, of not even knowing that we are escaping into these things. What was the intent of setting up the Health Food Organization in America? The original, pure, wonderful, magnificent intent was to bring back the land, was to protect the farmers, and then, as a result, protect what you're eating as well. But where did we lose that intent? Where did it go? Something went so wrong with that. Because our need of health food was from the fear of disease and death, fear. It wasn't from, let me surrender myself to Mother Earth and do everything that we possibly can to help her to heal. Let me surrender myself because my health depends on her health. The Mother Earth is also our primordial divine mother. She's not separate from our goddesses and our gods. And so we have to always be looking, but why did our mass intent become so powerful? The fear. What is feeding our fear? The suffering. So where is ahimsa in all of this? It's in your aware consciousness of the absolute need to completely re-embrace Mother, the absolute need to connect to her lunar rhythms or solar rhythms and learn them again. We could have never had toxic medicines. We could have never had these amazing untoward practices in our world if we had not lost that connection somewhere along the line. We were talking because my work, so to speak, comes through the instrument of Ayurveda. And my interest in it came from having survived ovarian cancer for no logical reason. And then I understood that there is a power that heals us, even if we don't want to live. And that was very profound, and it led me into the journey that I now have at 63 years old. But the phenomenal thing there in understanding the whole work that we are doing, it's so simple. I started looking at why did even Ayurveda start to become clinical? What was the clinical method? Why the clinical? Because humans have intelligence, and clinical erodes your intelligence because it's a prescriptive form of all sorts of treatment. And it's not just in medicine, it's in every possible thing that we look at in our life in terms of education and whatever. It's basically, many of it is prescriptive. That's changing now as well. And remember some of the older stories told by the older Vaidyas who were really barely making it in India, because India had lost this incredible vital form of healing and had gone to allopathy, and homeopathy, thank goodness, was there as well. And I remember when the Vaidya said that before even having the patient walk into their office, they would just look out and see which bird was flying, which direction, whatever, just using the whole of nature to divine, and they knew exactly who is coming, what her or his condition would be, how to approach the treatment, etc., because they were still so connected to the vibration of our Mother Earth. And today, do you remember, ladies, as we were chanting the bija mantras for Lalita, Tripura Sundari, the waxing moon mantras, the tree started shimmering just with such glee, exactly at the time as we were chanting. And as soon as we stopped chanting, the trees were still again. We are connected to these rhythms in ways visible and invisible, mutable and immutable. And so the message of Ahimsa is, let us reclaim the core of Mother. Let us understand who we all are as Mother and our relationship. Thank you so much for this time and for being here to bless. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Blessed be our Guru. Om. Thank you.